Project forward a few years, and if nothing changes, it's easy to imagine a scenario where China basically floods the entire world with cars, becomes the dominant supplier of vehicles in the entire world, ex-US. And then we're this little island where we have some domestic manufacturers of vehicles who basically can't export anymore because they're not competitive. And so they only sell into the US market. And we're in some ways, we're like an isolated country, like, North Korea, but in different context. Is that basically where we're headed here?
Well, potentially, but I think realistically, it's like gravity or water. The Chinese are going to find a way in, and it may be by acquiring Stellantis or a Nissan or a plant inside or rebadging. It's a Leap motor, but it's badged a Dodge. And people start to oh, yeah, okay, I understand it's Chinese, but it's American, and we're shared interests. So a lot of people point to the TikTok example as a precedent, right? TikTok, not that long ago, was decided both houses, the Biden, no TikTok, ban, not coming in. Here we are, a year later. Oh, yeah, TikTok's going to stay. There's going to be some American majority ownership. It will manage things. I think that's most likely scenario for Chinese cars, that maybe it's a joint venture. Maybe the American side has majority share, but it's hard to imagine a future where the Chinese are not here.
各位朋友大家好，欢迎收看今天的时政观察。最近汽车行业发生了一件足以载入教科书的大事，曾经不可一世的德国汽车巨头大众正在开启前所未有的裁员潮，甚至准备关闭本土工厂。而另一边，日本本田在东南亚节节败退，全球汽车产业的格局正在被一股来自东方的新能源海啸彻底重塑。有人甚至乐观地认为，只要筑起100%的关税高墙，就能把狼挡在门外。但事实真的如此吗？美国会不会在不久的将来变成全球汽车产业里一个孤立落后的孤岛？而那些看似强大的传统巨头又将迎来怎样的终局？今天这期节目，我们就来聊聊中国汽车正在引发的全球车市大地震。接下来我们直接看正片。
In 2020, China exported 1 million cars worldwide. This year, they're on track to export 12 million cars. 12 million. That's putting the hurt on legacy automakers in all these markets worldwide. We're living on an island here in the United States. We haven't felt it yet. So it's hard for us to imagine the immense capability of the Chinese automakers and how they're just taking other markets by storm.
Are we the only country that has imposed significant import tariffs on Chinese cars? Is that why we're just the only country that has that policy?
That's right. We're called the exceptional country for a reason, right? We are, until very recently, Canada was holding the line with us at 100% tariffs. That's gone. Prime Minister Carney now welcomes Chinese EV imports. Mexico has 50% imports starting in January of this year, but Mexico is still one of the leading targets for Chinese exports. So we are basically more or less the only nation in the world that effectively blocks Chinese cars.
All right, so we're going to talk more about what that means for the US and whether we will nonetheless see the incursion of Chinese cars in this country anytime soon. But before we do that, who are the big players these days? Who are this is one other thing I will point out, by the way, about the solar industry as it developed, is that the names of the Chinese companies who were the biggest solar panel manufacturers a decade ago are not the names of who are the biggest solar manufacturers today. There was a ton of turnover, even at the very top. In the 2010s, it was Suntech. Suntech doesn't really exist anymore. It was Yingli. Right. It was all these other companies, and now it's Longi and a bunch of others. So, do you see the same kind of turnover, or are we going to have more persistent brands in the vehicle world because it's more of a consumer product and they're trying to build up the brand?
All right. So one of the crazy things, you probably saw this in solar too, so there are dozens and dozens of Chinese car makers. At last count, there's more than 60. There are more than 100 individual brands. So you go, wait a second, how can that be? We have the Detroit 3, we have a handful in Japan. How come they have so many? Well, that's a whole nother story about how state capitalism works. But if we want to distill it down into its essential ingredients, think of two categories of players. of leaders in the industry. One would be the legacy automakers, the companies that have been around for at least 10 years, probably 20. And top of the list there is your BYD, which also happens to be a major battery manufacturer. Then you have Geely, which is the owner today of the Volvo brand and the Polestar brand and the Lotus brand. And then after that, you have a big state enterprise called Shanghai Automotive, which is exporting products under the MG brand, the iconic British brand they acquired several years ago. These are your legacy automakers. They're larger. They build several million cars a year, and they're good and strong in their own right. And then you have a second category, a brand new category, and think of these as like the Teslas of China. They've just been born in the last decade. Some of them are only 5 years old, and they've been founded by billionaires who made their fortunes originally in software, in the tech industry inside China. Now they're saying, oh, look what Tesla's doing to the auto industry globally as a massive disruptor. We'll be the Teslas of China. So you have names like Xiaomi, Xpeng, Leap Motor, who else? NIO's in the mix there. And, those are the main players in this sort of new Teslas of China category.
In terms of differentiation amongst them, I mean, we have multiple automakers, a smaller number. We have multiple automakers in the U.S. and those who import into the U.S. And there's all the standard versions of differentiation. The product is different. Cars are different from each other. What do you see as like the biggest differences amongst the major players, at least in China? Are they approaching the market with different strategies or different types of products, or are they all pretty similar and they're just cutthroat with each other?
I think of them as, ever see that picture of like a massive schools of fish all mixed together, shapes, sizes, colors, going in different directions? That's China's auto industry. So you have niche players, you have mass scale players, you have electric only specialists, you have companies that will produce every powertrain. But if I were going to try to distill it down, you have really old generation or your legacy automakers who are dependent on scale and low cost. That's your BYDs and Geelys and SAICs. Then you have this new generation that's all about software and software-defined vehicles and over-the-air updates and digital interfaces. So they're focused on making the car a gadget, the ultimate urban device. And so you have kind of, if we put it in American terms, you have Ford, GM, and Chrysler on the one hand, and you have Tesla, Rivian, Lucid on the other. That's the biggest distinction relevant to us in our discussion today.
You mentioned cost. Where are we in terms of cost? What are they charging in China, and then what are they charging for exported vehicles? And
this is where
I guess predominantly on electric vehicles. I know there's differences, but let's talk about the EVs.
Okay, because it's the future. I mean, electrics were 5% of the Chinese market in 2020. They're half now, so they're really on the ascendancy. Cost. This is where the meteor starts to look really scary. You can build an electric car in China and they do, and sell it for under $10,000. In terms of comparison to Europe and the United States, they're 30 to 40% less expensive. And so as you look around the world, you say, if you're going to build an electric vehicle, where should you build it? There's only one answer, and that's China. And Tesla's proof of concept of that. Half of Tesla's global production is centered in China. That's not by mistake. Elon looked around the world. Where can I be most competitive? China is the place to manufacture at scale and at low cost electric vehicles.
Is $10,000 the price or the cost?
The cost. No, they'll start with the BYD Seagull at about $8,500. Their cost per unit is probably around $7,000 in that price point. Their margins are super thin, Shane, super thin compared to anywhere else in the world. So this is the double-edged sort of knife edge of what's happening in China. You have scale, you have competitiveness, you have great products at low cost, but your margins are ultra thin. They're not making much money, but they're selling like crazy.
So before we get to the US then, in the rest of the world, these Chinese cars are flooding the market. Are we seeing automakers outside of the US start to feel the pain meaningfully? Like, are we going to see a wave of failures of automakers of basically everybody who's not Chinese and not US based, or at least not importing enough into the US for it to make up the difference?
We're already seeing it in Europe for sure. Volkswagen's come out and said between now and 2030, they'll lay off 50,000 people. This is unprecedented. They're closing plants for the first time since World War II. And the Germans are not alone. Honda, also for the first time since the 1950s, announced a loss last year. Why? They're getting beaten down in traditional markets like Thailand, Indonesia, Australia, the UK, across Europe. Virtually every legacy automaker is taking it on the chin. And the most vulnerable right now, there's two of them. One is Nissan, and the other is Stellantis, the group that owns, Fiat and Maserati and Jeep and Chrysler brands. Those two are the most vulnerable. So what will happen is either they'll joint venture with the Chinese and eventually be taken over by them, or the Chinese will just buy their brands outright. I mean, we're not talking about something that might happen 3 to 5 years from now. It's happening right now in Europe. Enormous pressure on the existing automakers just to stay alive.
好，看完正片，我们来做个总结。保护主义能赢得一时的喘息，但赢不来长期的竞争力。当欧洲、东南亚、拉美的老百姓都在开着更便宜、更智能的中国电动车时，美国消费者却不得不被迫为本土车企的溢价和落后买单。这种信息差和技术差才是最可怕的。面对这场已经把大众、本田逼到绝境的汽车海啸，你觉得美国靠高关税筑起的马奇诺防线还能坚持多久？未来你愿意买一辆外壳是美国品牌、内核是中国技术的电动车吗？欢迎在评论区留下你的看法，我们一起聊聊。如果你喜欢本期节目，别忘了点赞、关注并转发。这里是时政观察，我们下期节目再见。